Hello, everyone. I hope everyone is well. I'm joined today by one of our good friends from the BuildShip team, Colin. How's it going, Colin?
Hey everybody, how you doing, Matthew?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good, and I'm super excited for this one. I think we've cooked up something special today. We've been thinking how to put something together that's a bit unique for all this AI generation madness that's going on, and we thought, how can we make it less cliche? And the way we thought about it is creating something that's good from a business perspective. So I shall quickly share my screen before we jump into it. And what we're going to be building today is something like this. So you may or may not know, we've recently introduced some new AI features into the WeWeb product, and we're going to be utilizing them today for design purposes. So one of the cool things about the new AI features is you can pass in images as context. And so in prep for this, I thought maybe we could use wireframes, something I hadn't tried before. And in testing it, it worked extremely well. So I'm excited to get started with this. So this is the app we're going to be building. It's a 3-page app. I've got some wireframes prepped. And so what we're doing is we're passing in a URL for a company. This is the search input for that. And then we'll basically generate lead information about the company. So you can pass in a URL about the company. That will go into BuildShip, which Colin will explain what happens on the back end in a second. That will generate some information about the lead. So a lead score, a company summary, a potential angle you could take and output everything. So this will be the lead analysis page. We'll have a history page where we can see all of the generations. Another cool thing here is that we'll have some embedding searches. Again, Colin will explain more in depth in a second, but we'll use some embeddings to search through them semantically. Very cool. And then finally, we'll have a company settings page where you can pass in information about your company, which will then tailor how it finds the information it outputs here and generates leads. So that's broadly what we're getting into on the front end side. Before we do that though, did you want to just speak a bit at a high level about what's happening on the back end, Colin?
Definitely. So this lead generation workflow we thought would be helpful and kind of a generic example that you can apply to any other sort of thing where you want to get information from a website or get information from a text message, voice message, put that into a database and be able to quickly search through it. So that's something that we've just added on the BuildShip side is the ability to have embedding and kind of natural language queries in a BuildShip database. So you can use Supabase. We have embedding search for that as well, any sort of Firebase database, but now we natively support that within our BuildShip databases. So today we'll walk through an example of using a template to customize it for this use case, and hopefully that's something useful to you.
Super cool. And I know I've had a few questions about the different scraping functionalities and how you can incorporate that into embedding. So super. I'm looking forward to seeing how it all fits together. Fantastic. So I shall jump straight in to the front end side of things. So I'll switch to my WeWeb tab, and here I've just got a completely blank project. So what I'm going to start off with is the lead analysis page. So I am going to switch back to Figma for the wireframes I had. It's as simple as just taking a screenshot of the page. And what we'll do is we'll build out the first 3 pages, or all 3 pages that we'll have on the front end here. And then once those are built, we'll switch over to Colin and he can build out the back end, and then we'll integrate it all together. So I've taken my screenshot, and like every good cooking show, I've got a prompt that I prepared earlier just to save us a bit of time that I will paste in now, but I'll explain it once I put it in. So the prompt I'm putting in here is pretty much the same that will be used across all 3 pages, but just certain specifics will be changed. So here I'm creating an app that lets users submit the URL of a company, which is what we saw in the wireframe. That outputs a lead rating, a summary of the company, and a suggested angle. So this is a description of what will happen on this page. Here I'm just specifying to make sure that it doesn't need any more, it's not too ambiguous about what I need it to do. I need it to build a page where I submit the URL. Here's just some design information. So I wanted to make sure that all the elements are interactive, and the left side navbar is a multi-page section. This is something unique about WeWeb, where you can use multi-page sections, and it basically means if you're using that across pages, it doesn't have to continuously render it. It can preserve it across pages, which is what we want for the side navigation. And then I'm attaching the image, which I will just get again. So I will copy this image into the chat, and I will let AI do its thing. Now, this is in its first iteration, all these AI features. The great thing that it does now is the design generation. The workflow generation is something that we're continuously looking to improve. It's not all the way there yet. I think the design generation is where the AI shines at the moment. So I'm primarily going to be building this with design in mind for using the AI. But here and there, we can try the workflow generations. But again, keep in mind it's in beta, so if we have to tweak things manually here and there, it's expected for now. But in the next couple of days, we are going to be upgrading this. So stay on the lookout for that, because in internal testing, it's been quite crazy what it's come out with. But for now, we'll focus on the design generation. So as this goes, it's prepping variables. So company analysis, URL input, this will come from the search input. I'm sure it's about to create, and is loading. We can use this to display some kind of loader whenever the results are fetching. And as we can see, it's matching the wireframes pretty well. If I just hop back to Figma, this was our wireframe. And then back to the site, it's matching it very well.
So once this is done generating, it's something that you have the ability to edit kind of manually with the typical WeWeb interface as well, right? So it's not just kind of like a bunch of code in the background that you can't access or visually interact with.
Exactly, yeah. And that's where it shines, because we probably will need some manual intervention, like with all of these app generation tools at the minute. There's times when you want to just manually go into it because it's not doing what you want it to do. There's some kind of iteration hell it's stuck in. And the best part about this is that if it does do something I don't want it to do, or I just can't get it to do what I want it to do exactly, I can just manually go in and edit anything. So it's finished the generation for our page. And then just if I check the main content here, yes, I expected it would. So it has our results container, but it already has taken the presumption that we want to hide it when there is no results, which is what we want to do. So it's bound the display here, and I will just copy this for now and unbind it just to make sure that it's displaying, that it's matched the design. So if I display this, and it hasn't got anything in here. Okay, so the AI isn't perfect, but what I can do now is I can copy this individually. And I can paste this into here. So because I have the results container selected, it's passed it in as context to the chat. And so what I can do is I can actually ask it to specifically put things into this results container. So I will get rid of the image I previously had, which was the whole page. I'll paste in this individual part, and I'll ask it to fill this container. And the nice thing about the images as well is that the more you break it up, the more precise it rebuilds it. So in this case, the images aren't overly complex, but if you have something that is overly complex, it's better to break it up into segments. So kind of like we're doing here, passing in a certain part of the design or the image, and then including it into a certain div or a certain flexbox on the page. It's much better to do it that way because it's more likely to actually recreate it more one-to-one. Cool. So it gave us that. This is our first page. We'll return back to this. We'll probably have to add a few things to hook up all the functionality afterwards, but it's good for now. We'll move on to the next page, which was the history page. I will switch back to Figma, get a screenshot of our history page. I'll paste this in, and then I have another pre-cooked prompt at the ready, which is very similar to the one we gave before, but now it's just more tailored for this page individually. So great, we now need the history page. This is what is going to be on the page, so a list of all the previous generations. We want to give the user the ability to search through it, is what we see the search bar in the top right. Again, make sure the elements are interactive, and we've attached an image.
Well, that's cooking. Do you have any example prompts or things like on the website, or any suggestions of how to interact with something like this?
It's a good question. So at the minute, no, it's definitely something we want to put together internally. As we've been experimenting with this, we realize there's definitely best practices and ways to tailor your prompts to get the best output that is somewhat broad, in the sense that it's the same for all of, regardless of what it is you're using to generate applications with these AIs. There's better ways you can prompt it, which tends to be in a more technical way, so it's less ambiguity. But also in the sense of, in the context of WeWeb, there's specific things you can prompt it to just because of how you work with WeWeb and certain elements that just make it perform better. But unfortunately, it's not there yet. But once we kind of get past this initial hurdle of get everything out the door, then we really want to hone down on some kind of prompt education, because it makes such a massive difference to the outputs.
Yeah, it's definitely a time for experimentation on this stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm amazed at how it works. It's
Yeah.
nice to see how quickly these things are building into our everyday
Yeah.
work processes.
It's unbelievable the progress that gets made on just the week-to-week basis at the minute. Cool. So we have our history page, previous analysis with our search bar. We have our data grid that will take all of the information, so our name, a lead, rating, suggested approach, and a company summary. Cool. So that's hooked up. We will need to hook up this navigation at the end, though, just to make sure that the active states are correct, but we'll do that afterwards. So that is our history page done. And finally, we will want to do our settings page. So I shall switch back to Figma one last time, get a screenshot of our settings page.
Do you know of any good generative AI that's able to generate things like a wireframe that you're able to use as input?
That's a good question again. So I think there's one out there called UX Pilot. I didn't use it to generate this, but I have used it in the past. I think off the top of my head, it's UX Pilot. I'm not certain though, but that's the only one I've experimented with. And
Okay.
to be fair, I experimented with it probably about 3 months ago now. So with all of the recent advancements, it's probably got even better than it was a few months back.
Okay.
But I know there is quite a number of tools out there apart from just
But you don't need one, right? You don't need a wireframe in order to build something with the WeWeb AI.
No, you don't. I mean, if you have zero idea of what it is you want to build, then it's, in some ways, it's probably better to not actually give it wireframes, because it just has, I mean, it's an AI model that's been trained on millions of pieces of data. So it probably has almost better context than you will of what needs to be built sometimes from a user journey perspective. But if you have some kind of broad idea of what it is you want to build, then it does help to create wireframes if you want something tailored in terms of the journey experience, just so there's less ambiguity. But no, you definitely don't need them. Cool. Okay, I've got my settings page in, and then finally I'll paste in the last prompt I had prepared. So we need the settings page, and again, just some context about what will be on the page. So the main content, we want to save the description for the user, and it will be a rich text editor for the description. And again, make sure all of the elements are interactive. And finally, I've attached an image. Please recreate it. And it will build this one out.
I feel like we're all getting used to this time in between where you have to just kind of watch and wait.
It's
Like
nice though. One of the things to give ourselves props that's nice is that you get to see the generation in progress.
That's nice.
I guess because with a lot of the code generators or the app generators, it tends to be, you see the code generating, but you don't really know what it is visually. So the nice thing here is that you see it in real time visually start generating. Cool. So we have our company description now. Our company settings page with our description. So these are all 3 pages created. We'll just need to hook up some of the navigation, but we can do that at the end. But it is all ready for you to take over, I think, Colin.
Okay, fantastic. So now that we have the plating done, we will do the meat and potatoes in the middle. So do you want to put my screen up there?
Yes, we've got you.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks. So now that we have the front end done, we can build the back end. And for that, we're going to do the chat with BuildShip database template. And this will allow us to add all of these website URLs to a database after we scrape the website, extract the key information, and then we will be able to search through that data. So in this folder, here's my pre-cooked one here on the side. But what we just remixed is this chat with BuildShip database folder. There's 3 workflows in it. One is where you can add a piece of data to a BuildShip database and create an embedding for that piece of data. If you have the structured data ready as an object, a JSON object. What we're going to do today is use the unstructured data input. So here as the inputs to this workflow, and if you've never used BuildShip before, I like to think of it as how they teach kids how to code, where you kind of have these block visual elements of first we take in the data, next we do an if-then statement, then we do some sort of data manipulation and then output. So we'll walk through this backend step by step. First, we have this list of inputs. We have the unstructured data. For us, that's just going to be a website URL, so we can change that right there. The data schema, we can paste in what we want to actually get from that. And I had that pre-cooked. 1 second. So for us, you can either put the data schema here as in a default field. I'm actually going to delete the data schema as something that we care about and put it into the instructions of these extract data here. So in the extract data, we're going to get the information from the website URL and extract it into structured input in a JSON format. So for us, we are looking for a contact email, if there is any, the industry, a description, angle, and company name. So that's all the stuff that we want to be able to get out. And if we want to give it a little bit more information, we can, instead of giving just the type, I'll actually give a little bit of a description of what we want each field to be. So we want the lead rating to be, for example, high, medium, low. And these are just the variables that are going to be passed into this extract data field. The first thing we want to do after we have this website URL input, though, is scrape. So we go into add node, and we will add the scrape or crawl URL node. And the website URL for the value, we can take the input, and it suggests the website URL here as well, but we can take the inputs and select the website URL as a string. If we want to scrape all pages of the website, all links, and actually crawl the website, you can do true here. We'll just do false, which means it's just going to do the landing page of the website. And everything else in the advanced, you can leave as is. So let's walk through this. So we'll scrape the website URL. By clicking this little play button, we can test it. So let's just do WeWeb.io and test that crawl. And you have to have the HTTPS in front of it as like for a valid URL. So while that's cooking, we have the scraper crawl URL. Next, we will take the output of that scraper crawl URL and extract the data. So the output you can see here for the contents are everything that's on the HTML of that page. So sign in, try for free, build production grade web applications. That is what we want to put into the extract data node. So like we just made before, it's tasked with extracting this structured data. For the prompt, instead of the website URL only, we are going to give it the output of the last node, which is the scrape or crawl URL. And we can just give it the whole object. You could also give it just the contents here. And if you want to do the whole object, you're going to have to stringify this JSON. Okay. So after we extract that data, and we'll test the whole workflow now and see if I missed anything. I think I did miss a couple things. Let's see. We want to generate an embedding. And the embedding, if you don't know what embeddings are, the way I like to think about it is, let's say you have the word king, and you want to do some sort of mathematical representation of the word king. So I want to be able to do things like take king, subtract man, add woman, and therefore end up with queen. And so by putting together this vector representation of the word king, you can start doing interesting math and lookups on the embedding. So for us, we're going to care about the embedding field as the description. So we're just going to say that the extract data.description is the field that we want to care about. And that field is going to be a description of the company, one concise sentence summary of the company, because we want to be able to search for things like front-end web development and get WeWeb back from our database. So we have the description field is going to be our embedding field. Let's see, create vector embedding. It's going to be from here. So this creates a vector embedding from the embedded, the generated embedding numerical values. And then we create documents in our BuildShip database. And this is all going to be created automatically for you. So let's go ahead and test this. Right now it expects the website URL, collection name, and the embedding field. Did we want to add the company description and rating criteria?
I think so, yeah. At least the company description would be good, so we can pass it in dynamically.
Okay, so we'll add the company description as an input here. And we want to be able to add a description of our company that we are going to be able to actually evaluate the lead for. And so here in the prompt, I'm just going to put, this is the description of the company, evaluate the lead for. And for variables, I'll check for the inputs and enter the company description here.
Nice. And just to double check then, Colin, because I know we have a lot of Xano users who are curious about BuildShip. From that binding menu you just showed, I take it you can see all of the previous outputs from different modules and you can just easily bind them in?
Yes. So you can have a combination of text, variables. You can also put it all in JavaScript if you wanted to. So you can do any sort of combination or manipulation of the variables previously. So this can be the inputs, any of the environment or local variables that you can assign separately, or things like secret keys, so that you can have nice. Things like API keys. And then all of the previous nodes would show up here, and you can get any of the components of the object that's returned from that node.
Amazing.
Something you can also do that we won't go through really today is you can generate nodes with AI. And we actually have a builder assistant that is in the works. In the next couple of weeks, we'll be releasing, so that you can vibe code, I believe is the technical name now.
Very cool.
But it's really, it feels like, I'm excited for things like being able to let our agent talk to your agent to develop the backend that it wants for the front end that it's developing, and be something very human in the loop.
At that point, we just kick our feet up. At that point, we just kick our feet up.
Exactly. That's all we got to do. Then we'll be on the beach. Okay, so let's test this. BuildShip.com. For the collection name, let's call it URL summaries live, because we've tested this before. The embedding field, we will put, I think we actually, because we selected the embedding field here as description, I'm just going to delete that as an input. And then for the company description, I believe I had something pre-cooked. And let's say it's buildship.com. So let's say instead of BuildShip here, we will do a little advertisement for and see how BuildShip can be used in Supabase. So let's test that flow. So again, it's taking that website URL, it's crawling the URL, it's extracting the structured data for that URL, generating embeddings, creating a vector embedding, and what is happening here? Okay, it's just going to, this is, you can add a specific name for that embedding field. It's just going to be called raw data embedding because this is going to fail, and that's fine. And then you create the actual row in the BuildShip database. So we get that back. Let's do one more just to have it built out. Any suggestions, Matthew?
Give it one. Is there any suggestions in the chat? We'll just give it 5 seconds to see if anyone. I'm not sure what the delay is like. No. Okay.
I know I like using Product Hunt a lot right now.
I know in cooking this, we've been using Tesla a lot.
field. I'm just going to fix that vector field so that the raw data embedding is the vector field.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think there's a bit of a delay, so we can just go with the testing product on for now.
Okay. And maybe one more, just so we have at least 3 on there. I'll do WeWeb.io. I don't think that was actually added to the. Okay, so now that is all added to the database. If you come over here to the database page, you can go in and look at the database and see all the individual outputs. I think with tools like WeWeb, you don't necessarily have to go and check that because it's all just happening in the background. So you could go do that, but we won't waste time on that today. So now that we have a populated database with this ability to take in a website URL and create structured data from it, we want to test and make sure that everything's working correctly. So this is a natural language query. We will just go ahead and test this automatically or immediately. And the collection name was URL summaries live. And let's give it a max number of results of 10. If we leave it with an empty query, it's just going to return the whole database. So let's go ahead and test that. And we get WeWeb, and you see that it broke it down, company name, WeWeb, angle, how we might approach them, the description of the company, and then our lead rating. I'm very glad it's high. And then BuildShip, Supabase. Yeah, so all the I guess they're all high. We could choose something that's outside of it too. So that's in our collection. And then if we want to actually prompt, like have a natural language query, we could search for things like front end. And let's say we just want to get the top result. I'm going to test this now. It's actually going to fail the first time because this workflow, it's checking if there's a query. If there's no query, it's going to just return the whole database. If there is, it's going to generate an embedding for that query in the same style, and then vector query the database. With Firestore databases, you have to set up an index, a vector index. So we just have a button here to create index. It requires human in the loop with the Firestore settings currently. So we'll create the index. That needs to sit for 3 to 5 minutes in the oven. And until we get a nice crispy finish, we will let Matthew
Super, we'll go back to the cutting board. Great, we should switch back to the WeWeb side of things then. So we've got these 3 pages to set up, and we'll go through them in kind of sequence and how they all relate to each other. So as we said before, the nice thing about using all of the AI generation features inside of WeWeb is that well, you can edit it visually. So the AI can generate functionality. I'm going to leave it for now because, as I said, it's in beta. We want to focus on what it's very good at now, which is the design generation, but also showcase the fact you can edit it manually. So with the designs, I'm going to hook up what we need to in terms of functionality. So the first thing I'm going to do is make sure that these navigation fields link to the correct page. So this wants to link to the history page. Settings will link to the settings page. I can see there's some different states on them. Let's check what hover states they've applied. Cool, so we've got hover states. I will also add in an active state to each of these. So we will add an active link. What's the default styling on this one? I've got this, I will copy this across to the active state. And in WeWeb, if you add a link here, you automatically have access to this active link state. States are a nice way to manage, as it says in the 10 different states of things. So I could add a state if I wanted to. I can put in custom logic here and say when a certain condition is true, this state is true. And in here, I can apply whatever styling I like. But for now, we will use the default active link state. And in here, I will just paste in that active link color. I will do that for each of these. So add in our active link.
And Matthew, I actually need to ship the API still, so at some point we can jump back and do that.
Okay. And like this, cool. So if I now go on the settings page, did I leave that blank? Yes, I did. Okay, there we go. Put it to the settings page. We'll now be taken to the settings page. Make sure the history page is hooked up. Cool. Everything is hooked up in that regard. So we'll just create a company description variable here. And this will save our description. It will be a text variable, and I want to actually save this in local storage. In theory, in the real world, we want to save this probably to our backend on a per user basis, but for the example, I'll save it to local storage. And then in here, I can put in our company description, which when we set up the API call that Colin has created, it will pass in our description. So for now, since you're here, Colin, I will put in a pre-cooked description of BuildShip for the company description, like so. And so now when I press save changes in a workflow, I want to update our company description variable to be the input in here. And I will also set the initial value here to be the value of description, so that on page load, it will set it to be that. So I just need to paste this back in here, save changes. If I go to the history page and then switch back to settings, it should pre-populate it, which it does, fantastic. And so now if I go onto the lead analysis page, here I'll switch back to you, Colin, just so you can get that API finished off.
Great. So just saw in the comments, what are we building? We're trying to build a lead generation workflow where you can put in the URL of a company, scrape the company's website, and extract a list of relevant fields, a possible angle for how we can approach them, and then add it to a database and be able to query that database with embedding search, so natural language queries. So the thing that I forgot to do here is to actually ship the workflow. So with BuildShip, you can build these visual backends and then immediately ship it as an API that you can call in any sort of application, including a WeWeb front end. So to do that, we just need to connect our trigger. So we want to say, and click on the REST API call here. You can have any sort of trigger, anything like a cron job. So you can have a build job to run once a week. You can have it based on a new entry to a Supabase table, but emails, Gmail, things like that. But we're just going to use an API call. For us, all you have to do is click connect. And the fields, company description, website URL, and the collection name should be auto-populated. And what that does is it generates an API URL immediately for you that I can copy. And if I click here on the usage tab, oh, I need to ship my flow first. And when I ship the flow, it makes that URL live that you're able to send post requests to. So now that it's shipped, we get this nice JavaScript usage function of how you can use this API in action. We're also working on an AI handoff. So instead of just giving code, it's going to give a description of what are each of these variables, what are some examples of what they are expected to be. But for now, until we release that, I will copy this usage and send it over to Matthew on Slack.
Super.
And we should be good to go.
Amazing. Let me just bring that up. Cool. Right. We shall switch back.
And yes, Satyam, I see your message. It is assuming you have a list of companies you want to reach out to, but we also have a perplexity node in BuildShip. So you could just enter something like, we're looking for leads that we could reach out to for like small to medium companies in X industry, and use perplexity to get a list of URLs and then enter that list of URLs into this. So there's lots of different ways that you can generate that list of companies in the workflow itself.
Super. So switching it back to the WeWeb side to hook all of this up, we want to make an API call. So one of the nice things in WeWeb is when it comes to integrating external services, external backends, whatever it might be, we have plugins.
I can't see your screen.
I think I'll have to just reshare. Give me 1 second. Cool. Have you got me now? Super.
Got it.
So when it comes to integrating external services, we have plugins. I won't go through what they all do, but there's extensions which are kind of miscellaneous things like CSV, Stripe, NPM. We have authentication, and then there's data sources. So here, since we'll be making an API call, we'll add the REST API plugin to our project. We have collections here. We won't do this now, but we'll see collections in a second. So what this now means is on this company input URL, I can, did it put this inside of a form? No, it didn't. What I can do though is add a workflow. We'll want this to be, I think, on enter, and we can duplicate this in a second to add it to the search button itself. So the first thing we'll want to do is change a variable to say that it's now loading. I think the AI already did add this actually. So if I go into here, yes, there's an isLoading variable. So first off, I'll change isLoading to true. I'll want to make a REST API call, and this one will be to the endpoint you've created, Colin. So I'll just load that up. So it'll be a post request to this URL, which is the one Colin has given me. And it is for the inputs, we have the website URL. The company description. And the collection name. Super. So for the website URL, we will want this to be the URL input value. This is currently blank because there's nothing typed in, but it will have a value whenever we type something in. For the company description, we'll want this to be our description variable. And because this is saved to local storage, it will carry it across. And then finally, for the collection name, it is, correct me if I'm wrong, Colin, URL-summaries-v3?
Dash live. No v3, just live.
Dash live? Cool.
Yes.
So now, just to double check that this is working first, if I put in the URL here, so I say www.weweb.io, I then go back into that workflow and I test this module individually. Fantastic. We can see the response here. So it succeeded, Colin, but it gave me this response.
Let me see. Oh, so it didn't actually give you the right response back. Okay.
Should we switch it back to you for some live debugging?
Yes. So I think what happened is at the end of this workflow, you can choose what the API actually gives back to the person who called it. And instead of just doing the last node output like we had here, we can change this to custom output. And for the output, I'm guessing you want the extracted data. And you want the whole object with industry angle lead rating, all of that. So we select that extracted data object, make sure here that it's configured as an object, because that will fail, and click Save. So now let me just test that on a new company, which will be uber.com. Let's okay, so now instead, when we get the output, it's going to look like this. So that should be set. Now we just have to click Ship Changes, Update, and we are good to go.
Super. And just to double check, Colin, Giovanni had a question in the chat. What were the biggest challenges in the development process? I think this is probably rests on your side with the embedding setup. So if you want to speak a bit on that, what were the biggest challenges, I think, in setting up, all the embedding queries and everything that goes with it?
Firestore offers the ability to do something like that. So a lot of what we're doing is creating something that is pretty complicated to get started yourself into just a single node. So for example, today we spoke with somebody who was trying to match musicians in Nashville with with other musicians to like be able to fill gigs. And he said he'd been playing around with trying to get Firestore embeddings to work for a while, and now you can do it in 3 or 4 nodes with the template. So I think I'm not on our development team. I luckily just get to use the Lego blocks that they build for us. So I think this simplifies the process of trying to think about, okay, where is all this code? What does it need to do? And instead, you can just very visually lay out, okay, step 1, step 2, step 3, and can be pretty successful.
Yeah, I would say something similar on the WeWeb side, where, I mean, the pages themselves aren't overly complex what we're building, but if you're brand new to WeWeb or any form of these visual development tools, it can be a learning curve to get started. And even if you are aware of the tools, it still takes time to build the pages, regardless of how competent you are with the tools. So I don't think there's necessarily technical complexity on the WeWeb side, but it's certainly time consuming to build the pages. So it saves you a bunch of time using AI.
Yeah, and I think that's something I'm noticing watching you in WeWeb. It's something that you have such a depth of knowledge in, and same with me with BuildShip. I just kind of know where to look. And I know you are shipping the AI feature, which is just going to get better and better. We are shipping more and more AI features where you don't have to worry about the nuances of like, where is this setting? You're just going to be able to, do the vibe coding again, and get things done. So as you go, these things become more of like a infrastructure that you can use to more and more quickly build the stuff that's in your head.
I think it's over time you become more of an orchestrator than you do a builder with these tools. Cool. So we should jump back into the WeWeb side. So now that it's set up, I will again test our API module. And fantastic. So we're getting our data back now. What I will do, if the AI didn't already do it, which it did, fantastic, it pre-created our company analysis result variable when it set up the page. So I will do a change variable value action, and here I'm going to want to save the response from our API call. So I'm going to want to overwrite the entire object. And then in here, I can access all of the values that have been returned in this workflow. So here we have the object from the response. I can bind it to be the result. So then it will overwrite everything. And I finally will change the isLoading variable to be false because everything is done. And so now to bring this all together, I will actually, what I will do is I will overwrite this. So the variable currently has live values, and then bind our lead score values. So the nice thing about WeWeb is you can bind absolutely everything. When I first discovered it, that was what really drew me to it, because the fact you can bind everything basically opens up a world of flexibilities. So here we have different text colors the AI has done. I'm going to unbind this for the time being, just so we can see what we're working with first. And I want to bind the actual text. So here, we will bind it to, in our results, to be the lead rating itself. Like so. For the company summary, we'll do a similar thing, where in the lead analysis, the company analysis result, we will want it to be the description. And then last but not least, we will want to bind the suggested angle to be the correct result from our API call, which is this angle field. And here at the top, I'll just change this to be the name of the company that's returned, like so. And I will just set this display to be our isLoading variable is false. Cool. So now I will do one more thing. We want to only display it if there is values. So if this object, so I can go into the formula menu. Here there's various different formulas we can access natively in WeWeb. I'll want to get the keys of the object, which basically returns all of the fields. And so here I can say keys, it returns all of the keys. And I can say if the length equals 0, that is greater than 0, sorry. Okay, there we go. So if it's not loading and the number of items, the number of keys, sorry, inside of the object is greater than 0, that means it actually has some valid content. So if I was to refresh the page, it's hidden. Fantastic, that's what we want. And only when I actually search for something So this is currently fetching in the background. If I open up the logs, we can see it's doing something, and there we go. It only displays when we have a result. To add one kind of final cherry on this cake, it would be nice to have a loader in here. So in the add panel, I can access all of the native elements inside of WeWeb. So outside of the AI generations, I can add things manually to the page. And so we'll add a loader in here. And I will put this just outside of our results container so that they're not, the display doesn't use the same bindings. And so what I will say here for is loading, for the loader, sorry, is I will say when is loading is true. And just to double check this works, I'll put in a new URL. So let's say tesla.com, search, we have our loader. And then once the results are fetched, we then see the results. Fantastic. Okay, cool. So now let's set up our history page. So do I need to switch back to you here, Colin, to finalize some things for the history page where we get all of the previous generations?
Yes, I think I have to ship it, so you can come back to me.
Cool.
So we are back on the natural language query flow. So this is where if you have an empty query, which is what you'll use to just have the base version of the table, you'll get back the whole URL summaries live table. But let's say we want to search just for the first top result for front end, for example. If we test this flow, now that the vector embeddings index has been created in the BuildShip database, we get back WeWeb. So I don't even think it says front end here with a dash, but this is semantic search. So you can put anything at all, and whatever's closest to it in the embedding space is going to be returned. So all we need to do is ship it. That's not true. All we need to do is connect the REST API call. I guess that did it for me. Here in the query, I think I'm going to have to add from the trigger body.query. Otherwise, the number of results and collection name are already populated, and we will ship those changes. And back on the usage tab, I have this JavaScript. I'll send it over to you so you have the API URL and expected fields. And we should be good to go.
Nice. Okay.
One thing on this side, while we're running through examples, if you have any issues, especially from like a handshake with WeWeb, if it's not working on the WeWeb side, you can always check to see if it's working on the BuildShip side in the logs here. So that's at the bottom of the page. Click the bar. You can expand this if you want, and you can get for every individual node, the inputs, the outputs, the results, and where it's failing with some error handling.
Nice.
All right, back to you.
Super. So I think this is the home stretch now to finally hook up this last page. So what we'll want to do here is we'll want to use a collection. So in WeWeb, we have this data panel, which is where we had our variables, but we also have collections. And collections are a nice way whenever you're fetching data from an external service, some kind of backend, and it returns, doesn't have to necessarily be a list of information, but commonly it's a list of information, and you'll continually be refetching that in some way. So here we'll have a table, so it's a great use case for a collection, simply because we'll continuously be refetching that information. So here I can add a collection. I will call this previous generations. The source will be the REST API plugin that we have, but when you have different plugins installed, you'll see them all here as possible sources. So we'll choose REST API plugin. There's different modes. We won't go through what all of these do. We have documentation on it if you're curious, but for now it will be a dynamic query you want to make. And the configuration for this will be a post request. And here I'll get what you sent me, Colin. So it will be this URL. And we will want to pass in 3 different fields. So one will be query, which will be input into our search bar at the top. The other will be the number of results we want returned. And finally, the collection name. So like before, I can bind all of these or I can hard code them. For the query, I want this to be dynamic. So what I can do is on this search input, I can bind it to be the search input's value. Again, it's currently blank because there's nothing typed in. The number of results, I'll hard code this for now. So I will just put it to be 15. And the collection name is still URL summaries live, right, Colin?
URL summaries live.
Cool. So we can continue. This will test this first. We can see we have all of our results. I'll continue. And so now I can hook this collection up to the page. So inside of this grid, I can bind with the data. So first I will bind the data here. I will hook it up to our collection. And actually, you know what? This is a good use case for AI. So what I will do is, while this history grid is passed in as context, I will say, I want to connect this history grid to my collection. So we'll see how this goes. Again, it's not perfect at hooking up this kind of thing right now. What it's best at is design generation. So we can pick up the pieces if it doesn't do it perfectly, but let's see what it does.
I think that's the type of thing we're iterating on too, is how can we do these agent-to-agent handoffs?
Yeah.
They seem like a higher use case.
That's really where the perfection comes in, I think, because it's so easy to get one of these agents working per se, but how you hook it all up together is where the magic happens. And I think it's done it well. Okay, cool. So it's passed in our previous generations. What I'll be curious about is if it's recognized that it needs to access the data after this dot, as opposed to just doing the previous generations, but let's see. So for the row ID, it hasn't got the ID, unfortunately. We can change that in a second. For the company name, the key is company name. Okay, so I'll just change this slightly. So I'll pass this to be the ID. And then in here, the key will have to be inside of the object. We have another data object. So I'll be data underscore company name, angle, description, lead rating. Okay. So this will be data.company name. And it's filled it in now. Data.lead rating, or underscore lead rating, sorry. Data.angle. And then finally, data.description.
It's live. The feedback is fantastic.
And the nice thing, we've only just recently introduced this data grid, but the nice thing about it is that it has filtering pre-built in. So if I wanted to, I could type in Uber here and would pre-filter. Oh, okay, maybe we need to check that afterwards. But it should have filtered it by Uber. So I'll check that afterwards anyway. So we can now hook this up to dynamically search the collection. So from the search input on change, we will want to just refetch the collection. So because in that collection we created, we already have set up all of the inputs. So it dynamically passes in the query and it has the collection name and everything we hard coded. All we need to do now is refetch the collection. And because this data grid is bound to that collection, it will all correctly update without us doing anything apart from just refetching the collection. One final thing I'll add in on this input, just to ease the performance impacts on the back end, is this autocomplete. Sorry, not autocomplete, is the debounce. What this basically does is only until you've stopped typing for at least 500 milliseconds will it perform the search, just so it doesn't continuously make an API call every character you type, because chances are there'll be a number of character types before you actually wanted to perform the search. So now, let's see. So we had WeWeb as a front end. So if I type in, we have Superbase here as well, actually. So in theory, if I type in backend, let's see if it filters it to Superbase as the first one. I'm not sure what's happened there. Let's check.
Looks like the first row might be. So how many What's the number of results you've put in?
15.
Let me check on this side in the logs to see if we have anything going on. It should sort them.
This might be, so we've recently introduced this data grid. It's not perfect. It might be related to the data grid itself. So what I'm going to just quickly do is, and this data grid is only used by AI at the moment, I'm just going to manually put another data grid on the page. And it uses that one as well. Okay. Okay, well, this is the demo effect, live in real time. Let's see if we can fix this with AI. So what I want it to do is, I'm going to put a div in here. Put it beneath this grid, and I actually want it to create me a table with the columns.
It might be good to constrain your results to 3.
3, okay.
Just to get the top 3 for example's sake.
So I'll just input this, and then before I actually populate this with data, let's check if it has to do with the number of results after this is done generating. I think we need to add elevator music while this is generating.
Can you whistle?
I don't think it wouldn't be pleasant on the mic. Cool. Okay, so we have that. I'm just going to add a bit of spacing in between these.
And maybe search for something like self-driving. I think backend. The trouble with embeddings in semantic search is when you do something like embed an entire company description like we did, it's a little bit wonky because it's trying to condense it all into like a point cloud. So I think if we were more intelligent with our embeddings and maybe did multiple embeddings for each company with like different clauses, it would give us better searches.
Okay.
I leave that as an exercise to the viewer.
Okay.
We can definitely do a deeper dive on that separately.
Cool. So just to double check this now. So I have 3 passed in. I'll just confirm this. It seems to be returning more than 3, but let's see if it works for the query. So if I do backend,
I'll check if there's any blank entries or something.
it seems to be, so the number of results returned for queries is 3, but I don't think it's applying to searches without any queries. When I search backend, though, it does semantically search through it correctly, it seems.
Okay. Do self-driving. See if we get Tesla, Uber.
There we go.
Cool. And it sorts it by similarity to that. So the top one. So you could run something like only give me the responses if they're within a certain range of my search, but this one just returns the top 3 dependent regardless.
Nice. And so just to do a bit of testing then, so in theory, if we were to add, I think NVIDIA is .com, but we'll find out. Cool, yes. And so if we were now to go into history, One thing I forgot to add actually is on page load of the history page, we want to fetch the collection. So it initializes all of the data. So I can test this again just to imitate it. So it resets all of the data. Cool, we have NVIDIA. And so now in theory, if I was to type in graphics card, cool, we have NVIDIA, nice. And as we can see here before, this is based around BuildShip because BuildShip was our company description. But if we were to change this to WeWeb, so we could say WeWeb is a low-code front-end builder, and just keep it as that for now. We can save the changes. This will then update our company description, which we can see in real time in the variables tab over here. And if we go to lead analysis, and again, who can we type in? Let's try our good old friends. Is it
I think you need HTTPS in front of it for this. We'll change the web scraping tool so that you can do just websites. I think that's a common.
What does it end in? Sorry, Colin.
.com.
Cool.
Classic.
Hopefully we've rigged this to be a high rating.
Yeah, I hope so.
Fantastic. Okay. Cool. And then obviously the angle is applicable for whatever company description you put in. And then finally, if we go to history, it updates accordingly in the suggested approach. There. Fantastic. So I think that's about everything. Is there anything else you wanted to run through, Colin?
Maybe just talking about what we might be able to customize. So like this is a very generic flow that you could use for any type of use case. Really from the BuildShip perspective, this allows you to, this is using, for people who came in late, this is using a template on BuildShip, which is chat with BuildShip database. So it lets you add any sort of data to a BuildShip database, choose a field to embed, and then go and search through that embedding. So any sort of thing where you want to be able to have this kind of natural language interaction with the database and then take some action on it. So we're doing some things internally where you're able to do semantic search on a database, and then based on the top 10 results, you're having an AI evaluate those results and then send us a message on Discord if it's something that we need to add our attention to, for example. So really, creativity is your limit here. And the principles that we showed here are things that you can very quickly build into your app. The search query problem that Satyam asked, I think from the BuildShip side, it was make sure your embeddings are solid. We can do a video on that at some point from the BuildShip perspective of how do you make good embeddings that you're able to easily search through. From the WeWeb side, I think it was something with the table. Matthew.
Sorry, yeah. So actually, I'm not too sure on that one. I have to check it with the team afterwards, because when we put the number of results to 3 in the API call, it seemed to resolve it. So I'm not too sure if that was actually on the BuildShip or the WeWeb side. So we'd have to look at it a bit more afterwards. But when I put the results to 3, it seemed to resolve it.
Yeah, nice. And I think what's also really nice to see, like this was 1 hour where we built these basically from scratch, or using template from the BuildShip side, using AI from the WeWeb side. So with just a little bit more debugging from for a specific use case, that just imagine what you can do with a day or a couple weeks to really refine towards your use case and tests and everything like that.
Yeah. And just to finally say on the front end side is that in a real world use case, how we've set this up wouldn't be practical probably unless you were using it completely on your own. So in the fact you're saving the description to local storage, and obviously all of the endpoints that we've set up don't require authentication. So in a real world circumstance, you'd want to set up probably some kind of authentication in your backend to handle users and save the generations and the company descriptions on a per user basis. And so if we wanted to make those adjustments on the front end side, we could quite literally just have the designs adjusted by AI. So I could say on this page now, actually inside this left navigation, I now want to show the and I can pass in the navigation as context here. And so now I can make this prompt And so you could have your designs adjusted by the AI to cater for, the new authentication, whatever the specific user's information is, whatever it might be. So that's just one thing to note, is that if you were using this in a real world use case, you'd have to make some small adjustments here and there. But with the flexibility of the AI and small tweaks you can make using the editor manually, and then obviously, as Colin said, the flexibility on the BuildShip side, it's all possible. And given this took an hour, you can get things done in a very speedy manner when you put it all together.
So I think from our side, to get started with BuildShip, go to buildship.com, go to the app, and test out a template. We have a bunch of videos up on YouTube. We're posting more and more like kind of walkthroughs of how to use the templates for specific use cases. Reach out to us on Discord or here on YouTube, and we'd be happy to try and put something together for your use case. And on the pricing side of things, every node that you saw costs 0.0001 cents to run. So it's about a tenth cheaper than some of the other workflow automation companies like Zapier or Make, and offers a lot of flexibility. So that's just kind of generally how you get started. And we offer a free plan where you get 10,000 node executions for free to come try it out. From the WeWeb side, I'd love to hear also a little bit about like pricing, but then also how do you deploy and how do you turn this into something that you can use every day from where we got to today? From the BuildShip side, we're done. Like everything's ready to ship.
100%. Yeah, no. So we've recently introduced pricing that we're very proud of. So prior to, I think we introduced about 2 weeks ago, you had to pay for a plan to actually publish a project. Now you can publish projects for free, which is fantastic. And then all free plans have access to the code export also. And they also have access to obviously the AI and tokens. The amount of tokens you have available scales based on whatever tier of the plan you're on. How those tokens are used at the minute is it's being iterated on each week as we change things and kind of perfect the process. So I couldn't speak on that too much. But if you want more information, I would say check out our pricing page, and you can actually book a one-on-one call with a team member to run through a use case and explore the pricing plans. So if you're interested in learning more, 100% check out the pricing plans page we have on our website. And if you want to get started, it's as simple as signing up for free. You can publish for free and start using the AI and testing whatever it is you want to test. Super.
Great. And to actually deploy this into production, just back on your page, like you just click deploy and it's done. You mentioned things like authentication and that makes sense, but
you know what? That is a fantastic segue, Colin. Let's actually, before we go, we can deploy this now and use it in live. So yes, it's as simple as clicking deploy in the top right. You can give it a title. You can press deploy. As it generates here, you see there's everything happening on the deployment side in the back end. If you would like here, you can also export the code. I can show you this whenever it is deployed, because the nice thing about it as well is you can actually integrate it or sync it with your GitHub. If you're using GitHub for your deployment purposes, you can sync it live with GitHub. So there's that one-to-one connection. So yeah, there's various one-click deployment processes, that you can utilize. And it is simple as getting started that way. And it's, as I say, it's all available on the free plan, which is very nice now, the fact you can deploy being on the free plan.
Great. So everything we did, everybody on the call can try for free today to get to something that's working and customized for their use case. So exactly. Reach out to us what you build. Really looking forward to seeing it.
100%.
And thanks very much to Matthew and the WeWeb team, Tamara in the background, setting everything up. And yeah, I look forward to doing something like this again. So appreciate you.
100%. And as you said, I think you said, Colin, it's the workflow you made will be available as a remix / a template. Is that right?
Yes, the chat with BuildShip database is a template in the YouTube description. We will update with the remix link, so you can just click and remix immediately.
Super. And I can also upload what we just created into the WeWeb marketplace as a template. So if anyone's curious to combine the two, you're more than welcome to do so. Fantastic. Well, thank you ever so much for joining me on this one, Colin. It was super cool to see it all come together like this. And I know when we were in the kind of initial conversation about this, we were thinking what to put together, how can we make it actually useful? And I think we definitely put together something with all this AI generation that is useful from a business perspective. So it's very cool to see it all come together.
Definitely. And looking forward, comment here if there's something you want to see built. We just released things like voice-to-voice translation capabilities. We just released the Perplexity Deep Research node. So if there's other things that you think that you want to see built on BuildShip in the back end and somehow interacted with on the front end with WeWeb, we'd love to do this again.
100%. And from the WeWeb side, keep your eyes out for future builds like this. As I said, right now the AI is pretty much focused on a design generation. It's very good at design generation. The workflow side of things is something we're improving week to week. And in the near future, we're looking to release basically a new way of handling workflow generations, which should improve it tremendously. So we're very excited to put that out there and show everyone how it works. So keep your eyes peeled. Super. Well, thank you ever so much again, Colin. Thanks everyone who tuned in. And until next time, we shall catch you in the next one.